Craniopharyngiomas are a rare type of brain tumor seen in children. Found near the pituitary gland, these tumors can expand and compress nearby brain structures, leading to visual changes and hormonal imbalances. In this video, I'll be giving you my visual mnemonic to learn all the key facts about this brain tumor. So what are you waiting for? Let's get started. This scene takes place inside a construction crane. You know, since a crane reminds me of the term craniopharyngioma. Get it? A crane for craniopharyngioma? This crane should anchor you to our scene on craniopharyngioma. Next, notice how we're working during the day. That's right, because construction at night is a big no-no. We don't want any noise complaints. At Pixorize, we use daytime as a symbol for childhood tumors and nighttime as a symbol for adult tumors. Why do you think that might be? Well, daytime occurs earlier in the day, which stands for children. Nighttime occurs later on in the day, which stands for adults. We'll be using this structure for all our videos on the brain tumors. And since the scene takes place during the day, it should help you remember that craniopharyngiomas are usually found in children. In fact, craniopharyngiomas are the most common supratentorial tumor found in children. Supratentorial, as in above the tentorium cerebelli, which you may remember from anatomy as the membrane separating the cerebellum from the cortex above. Tumors that are supratentorial, therefore, are found above the tentorium. In other words, they're found in the cerebral cortex. Now that we've determined which population craniopharyngiomas affect, let's discuss the pathophysiology of this tumor. Take a look at this rat sitting in this brown pouch here. He looks pretty hungry, but more on that later. This rat in a pouch is here to help you remember Rotka's pouch. Get it? A rat in a pouch for Rotka's pouch? Craniopharyngiomas are derived from the remnants of Rotka's pouch. So what is Rotka's pouch anyways? Well, Rotka's pouch is an invagination of the roof of the mouth that gives rise to the anterior pituitary gland. That's right, it comes from the mouth, which is itself derived from surface ectoderm. Ugh, why did the rat have to eat my lunch? So the surface ectoderm bit is actually pretty important, and to peg this fact, take a look at my jacket here. Yeah, it's a hot day out and I took off my jacket earlier for lunch. By the way, this jacket should also help you remember ectoderm. You know, since the ectoderm is the outermost germ layer, kind of like a coat or jacket, right? The prefix ecto means outside, so the ectoderm literally means outermost germ layer. For those of you aiming for the 270, you should also remember that craniopharyngiomas arise from surface ectoderm and not neuroectoderm. Surface ectoderm forms structures like the skin as well as the mouth, which you may remember from our earlier conversation on Rotka's pouch. This should be contrasted with neuroectoderm, which forms most neurons in the brain, including the posterior pituitary gland. This can be a good way to test you, since craniopharyngiomas are one of the only primary brain tumors not derived from neuroectoderm. Instead, they come from the surface ectoderm, since they come from Rotka's pouch. But back to the high-yield stuff. Just remember my jacket here to peg the ectodermal origin of this tumor. Now that we've discussed the pathophysiology, let's shift our attention to me here. Yep, I'm the construction worker pouring motor oil into our crane, because cranes need oil, right? This motor oil should also remind you of the motor oil-like fluid found in craniopharyngiomas. On macroscopic examination, craniopharyngiomas are cyst-like lesions filled with brownish-yellow viscous fluid. This fluid is rich in cholesterol and looks a lot like motor oil, hence the name motor oil-like fluid. Just remember me filling up the motor oil in this crane to peg this fact. Because we can't always rely on surgical resection and checking the fluid inside to get a diagnosis, we also have to know what these tumors look like on imaging. To address this, take a look at this Kelsey Yum ice cream. Yup, I love ice cream with my lunch, but I think the rat has also gotten to my ice cream. Man, wasn't eating my lunch enough for him? Leave my ice cream alone. By the way, the calcium ice cream here should help you remember calcium, since craniopharyngiomas are calcified tumors. In other words, they create intracranial calcifications that appear bright on CT scan. So what are these clinical features of these tumors anyways? Craniopharyngiomas are benign, but they primarily cause problems through mass effect. In other words, they can compress nearby structures in the brain. Take a look at these two sandbags that our crane is moving. They're shaped like the pituitary gland, right? Yep, this is here to help you remember that craniopharyngiomas can damage the pituitary gland, causing hypopituitarism. Because craniopharyngiomas come from Rotke's pouch, which forms the anterior pituitary gland, you can imagine how the growth of these tumors can compress on the pituitary gland. This leads to downstream hormonal imbalances, which may be the presenting sign of disease. Next, take a look at the buildings left and right. Where there are cranes, there are buildings, right? But take a closer look at the shadow cast by the buildings. Yeah, these shadows are particularly pronounced on the left and right sides, right? This picture is here to help you remember bitemporal hemianopia, a type of vision loss in which vision is missing in the outer half of both the right and left visual fields. Craniopharyngiomas can cause bitemporal hemianopia by compressing on the central portion of the optic chiasm. I won't get into the specifics of the visual tracts and how they cross here. That's up to you to review on your own. In general, you should remember that compression of the optic chiasm leads to visual field defects on the far left and right sides. This is a finding shared with other pituitary tumors like pituitary adenoma, and the shadows of our buildings are a nice way to help you remember this particular pattern of vision loss. So that wraps up our video on craniopharyngiomas. Let's do a quick recap. Craniopharyngiomas are the most common supratentorial tumor of children. They are derived from Rotke's pouch, which is a fetal structure comprised of surface ectoderm that eventually gives rise to the anterior pituitary gland. While they're technically benign tumors, craniopharyngiomas can cause hypopituitarism through mass effects on the pituitary gland. Additionally, these tumors can cause bitemporal hemianopsia due to compression of the nearby optic chiasm. Craniopharyngiomas appear calcified on CT, and surgical resection will show a cystic tumor filled with brownish yellow motor oil-like fluid. And that's all for craniopharyngiomas. I hope the rat left me some of my lunch. I'll see you next time.